All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Turkish coffee crypto stream where we talk about our favorite flavors of the Joe, not Joe Anderson down there. He is the American badass. So welcome him. Welcome Dan Geraci, president or chairman, or is it both of the Planetary Society, sir?
Well, chairman of the Planetary Society and now CEO of Freefall. So
There you go. I knew there were multiple titles in there somewhere.
yeah, well,
Is that a new designation?
Yeah, the board decided I needed more to do. So
No, perfect.
and
Well,
then
congratulations.
They
That's awesome.
wanted somebody to blame for everything. So
And hedge fund analyst Bryce Smith. How you doing, Bryce?
Hey, everybody.
So, yeah, I mean, we can delve into whatever topics. Usually, I guess Dan takes the lead on that. Just following up on last week's Rocket Lab stock decline after the failed launch. I guess it got back a good percentage of its gains, but it's since then given theirs back with the broader market weakness. So, you got any updated take on Rocket Lab, Bryce, before we get too far in?
No, I haven't heard anything. I know they're working. I mean, I think they're essentially going to be grounded until they can figure out what the issue is and get the FAA to sign off on it again. And I know they've got a bunch of rockets stacked up, and I think Peter Beck tweeted that they were ready to go as soon as they can get this issue figured out, and they've still got a pretty good backlog. But I'm sure it'll be. I think Cody said last time it took, I don't remember, 3 months or something like that to get the approval again, and I could be wrong, but it's it'll definitely put them back on their launch cadence, and I'm sure they'll have to update their revenue guidance for the full year. And I mean, honestly, the rocket launch business is still a lot smaller than the space systems portion of their revenue. The satellite manufacturing and software and everything else they do, but it's not insignificant. So it definitely will be a hit to the top line this year.
Well, it's off 50% from its high almost. I mean, you can always look at it as an opportunity, I guess, if you if you feel like over the long term, I mean, it's a good buying opportunity. So
yeah, absolutely.
I think I mentioned it last week. Trading with Cody subs. I mean, you're buying it with a 3 handle months and months ago. So it's entry points have a lot to do with how you take your investment course and how you trade around certain stocks. So if you get a good entry, you're not feeling the need to get in as hard, maybe, or hold on as hard, I guess I should say, as if you bought around $5, $6, $7 or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
well, launch cadence is going to be something everybody's going to have to get used to. It's worse than supply chain because it's everything can be working great, but if launch cadence slips, you want to talk about the very front end and back end of the supply chain being pulled around and plugged into each other and clogged. That's launch cadence, and it's going to take a while before the wrinkles get ironed out because there's so many different stages to a launch cadence determinant of it. Could be everything from regulators to issues with final testing and clearance and weather and you name it. It's a nightmare, and people are going to just have to factor it in the way we factor in the impact on other transportation due to major events that are beyond their direct control. So grounding an airline for a month has an impact on revenue. It's kind of it's not too different. There's a lot to be learned for the space industry right now.
Was the actual cause, I don't think we discussed this last week, but did they identify the actual cause of the failure?
Not yet. Not that I've seen.
Okay.
Yeah, on the tweet that you were talking about, Bryce, he mentioned they were getting close to figuring out exactly what it was, and they would be back on track as soon as they dialed that in.
The reality is, I'm sure they know exactly where the failure was. I think it's more a matter of having answers to all the follow-on questions that are going to come when they say this is what caused it, because then the questions will be, how did that happen? Why didn't you guys know? Didn't you test for that? What are you going to do to fix it? What does this mean? So they'd rather answer all the questions at once rather than, death by 1,000 cuts from saying this didn't work and then having 2 weeks of media battering to deal with. They'd rather deal with the media in as small a window of time as possible. So typically what happens, it's just like when the government says, oh, we're waiting till the facts come in. It's like, yeah, you're waiting till the BS gets lined up before the facts can come in. So I'm sure they know. You go back and look at the whole sequence, where something went sideways. Somebody was sitting at their console and went, oops. So this isn't a mystery. It is rocket science, but it's not a mystery.
And I guess with all the means and methods and sensors and data collectors, to your point, Dan, I'm sure they know. It's just strategically, let's get our ducks in a row before we start actually fully talking.
The bigger story would be if they didn't know until now. That would be a big story. It's like, how do you go this long without knowing? You want to talk about, here we've got all these stories about rapid deployment and the ability to turn flights around, launch on demand in 24 hours, the way that Firefly just did, and do all this stuff. And then it's like, oh yeah, well, we launched, we had a failure and we don't know what happened. Days later, a week later, they're not going to get any business from anybody if that's actually in fact the case. So it's as an article I read said, one of the Space Force people that was applauding how quickly they got that rapid deployment payload up. They integrated the payload. It took them 58 hours or something, and then got the launch ready and up in 24 hours after that. And they said, this is great. The last time we tried this, it took 21 days. So that was an improvement. But they said, we're going to push the commercial industry as hard as we can to keep getting the turnaround time down. And they said, we're going to take advantage of the competition in the marketplace to do that. So not good timing for a failed launch.
No. And they've won a lot of business lately from other failed launch companies, and so that was a kind of a growth area for them. And then now all of a sudden, if customers or potential customers have a question mark whenever their satellite's fixing to go up, their payload's fixing to go up, that's just something that they have to think about. And SpaceX is a competitor, but I think it's booked out so far that there's still really no competition for small launch, but it's still something that customers
like where else would they go, really? I mean, Rocket Lab is I would think, closer to SpaceX than most, but
that's the position now. Well, yeah, closer is a relative term in this sense, but they are. But at the end of the day, as we've discussed many times, and I know I've said this a lot with the launch industry, consolidation is here and it's going to be here for a long time. And yes, they did gain business. It was addition by subtraction. Failed companies go away and they end up winning business, picking up business. Customers have to go someplace. Not everybody can go to SpaceX. At some point, SpaceX has a backlog that says, well, I could launch you on the third Tuesday of next year, and then you're going to have somebody there going, yoo-hoo, we have capacity. We're going up in 2 months. And so that's what's going to start to happen. You're going to fill the preferred provider bucket first, and then the launches are going to cascade down by capacity. Anybody further below SpaceX who has a failure or who introduces enough doubt, people are going to say, well, let's see, do I go with them even though they're available right now, but they've had issues? Or do I wait for the one I know has a 99.99% chance of getting my payload up there. And that's going to become the market dynamic until people can show that they have the same reliability as SpaceX. That's just going to take hundreds of launches.
Yeah.
And and that means how many failures out of 100? 1, 21? I mean, who knows? So I think there's confidence in Rocket Lab, but I think you also have hope and expectations that they will figure it out and get it right and fix the problem. That's the test period they're in now. Prove that people's confidence is warranted, identify it, fix it, launch again, have things go great. But launch again and have another problem, that is a life-threatening blow if they have 2 in a row after they say they fixed it. So
if there's 2 in a row, hypothetically, let's hope not, but where would one look after that for alternatives, not named SpaceX?
You're back to taking chances on the next round of up-and-coming launchers. And, Firefly will get attention for the payloads it can carry because they now have the Space Force gold star on their foreheads. So from this last thing, but again, there is no full solution that can match up to SpaceX right now. So, if I'm a competitor down below Rocket Lab, I wasn't, sending sympathy cards. I'm sitting there saying, whew, they just bought the rest of us a lot of time because they're not even foolproof. So, we've got time to catch up. We can close some distance, not because they're moving faster, because Rocket Lab came back a little bit to the rest of the market. Every time you fail, you're moving back to let the rest of the market come up. And so this is going to be an ongoing issue. You're going to have companies go through fits and starts. Then you'll see another company have a nonstop run of 10 or 15 launches in a row when everybody's going to be singing their praises, and they'll be the new darling, and then they'll have a failure. And then Rocket Lab will run off on a tear, and it's going to be one of these. It's just the way it's going to work until you have enough players where the problems have been figured out and they stop trying to have the most unique engine in the world rather than one that works over and over and over again. And I think that's where we're going to end up. But it's going to take the rest of the decade before you have a half dozen launchers with hundreds of launches under their belt and relatively equivalent reliability. It's just volume. So how many rockets can you build? How many rockets can you launch? And how fast can you do it?
Dan, what do you think is the pain point, like in rocket manufacturing? Is it, as it stands today, is it building the fuselage? Is it motors? Is it software?
Well, it's the engines and it's the guidance and control systems that tell the engines how to behave. The fuselage, I mean, it's an old technology. I mean, they're basically making cylinders and stacking them on top of each other and putting them, just attaching them to each other, but it's all cylinders. You go to this, I remember being in the SpaceX plant way back, long time ago. And, they were making the rocket bodies, and they were 5 foot tall cylinders that were, a few soda cans worth of thickness in terms of the the aluminum bodies that they were making them out of, because they just have to hold together and perform their function. They're not doing much, so they have to be lightweight and they can be fragile. And they have to just survive launch, because once they get into orbit, their structural integrity is fine. They're in the worst shape under gravity. So it's the engines. Do they fire consistently Do they burn right? Do they not fail? Are there glitches in the software that make it burn too long and screw everything up, make it shut down early, and they don't achieve orbit? Those are the two big pain points.
Yeah.
Deployment of payloads is a pretty routine capability that's been around for a long time. The bigger problem for a lot of is the payloads themselves having deployment or power issues, but that's not the rocket launcher's problem. That's the payload manufacturer or whoever the customer is for the launch. So you got to reach your orbit, and you got to do it without blowing something up.
Mm-hmm.
It's still hard.
Yeah, that's the incredible part, I think, to me, is it's pretty intuitive when you think of, I mean, the rocket as a technology has been around for a long time, and yet it's still so damn hard to make one and make it reliable. And
well, they have to do,
consistently.
when you think of rockets, all they are is, intercontinental ballistic missiles with a different mission. That's how they started. The Saturn V was all the Apollo and Gemini and Mercury rockets were just modified ICBMs.
Wow.
From because we got lucky in the U.S. We got the better German rocket scientists at the end of World War II.
Yeah.
The Peenemünde rocket scientist, von Braun and that whole crew. Russians got the B team at the time. And so, they just use that same rocket technology to say, okay, what are we carrying? It's not a warhead in the nose cone anymore that has to go a finite distance and hit something.
Yeah.
And it was all about guidance. It was how much bigger, how many millions of pounds of thrust do these need to be able to deliver? How big do these engines need to be to get into orbit and keep going? And so that's why with Elon coming in and saying, hey, we're going to have reusable rockets. That changed the whole game. It just changed the whole game. And instead of, hey, everything we make, we throw away.
Yep.
Which is typical of government bloat.
Yeah.
We can just make as many as we need.
Yeah.
Well, now reusable. So now you want to get difficult about rockets now. Okay. Landing them, right?
Yeah, I could see that being hard.
And yet it didn't take them long to get that right either. So, it's never going to be easy. It's going to get easier, but it's like airplanes, right? Look at how long it's taken to get to a point where jet engines are ridiculously reliable. I mean, other than some 1 in a million mechanical failure, or a flock of geese deciding to try to get through one, they just, you don't even have to think about them, man. They just work.
They do.
And planes don't just fall apart, and you can sit on an airplane, and if you've ever been in a horrendous amount of turbulence or a storm, and you're looking out the window and those wings are flapping like, it's literally a bird, and you're saying, and everything's shaking and wobbling, you're going, how the hell is this thing staying together? It's impressive. It's impressive engineering, but it's been, how many thousands of flights a day are happening every day? There's learning. And so that's the reality.
Boeing makes a pretty damn good airplane, and then yet they can't like figure out how to make a rocket do the same thing and use it over and over again. It's like
two different things.
Yeah.
And when they're making rockets, they're doing it for the government. And so add in the factor of quintuple redundancy, overspending, overbilling, bloat. This is why Blue Origin has a new CEO, because the old CEO, and if you read anything that's out there, the employees were the happiest bunch of people to see that change. You had a Boeing executive who was good at building things. He went from 1,100 people or 500 people to 11,000. Didn't deliver anything. Okay. He ran it like a government contractor, and it was loaded with Boeing people that they had taken. I mean, Blue Origin is like Boeing Jr. when you look at the employee roles, but they didn't execute. And look at Boeing with Starliner. Okay,
Yeah,
they still haven't flown it.
I know.
And so who did Bezos put in? Somebody from Amazon. You know, does he know the square root of anything about space? Doesn't need to. He needs to know how to run a business.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that's speaking to the notion of, you know, what do companies need? Space companies, especially startups, need business people at the helm. There's more than enough engineering. There isn't enough business and operating experience. And so, you know, look at what SpaceX did in the same time. Go back in time to the point where they were both in existence, when they both started, Blue and SpaceX.
Yeah.
And look at what's happened since. Okay.
Oh, totally.
I mean, it's an embarrassment for Blue Origin. And so Bezos made the change, albeit way too late.
What is Gwen, the CEO of SpaceX? I can't think of her last name.
Yeah, Shotwell.
What's her background?
She's an operating person.
Yeah.
I don't know her resume.
I don't either.
But she's all business. She takes no prisoners, and she's tough. And more importantly, she will stand up to Elon without any issues whatsoever. And so I think that's the difference. Is you go ahead and set the vision, you set the direction, you go run around, be Mr. Outside, go do everything. I'll clean up your mess after you. I'll explain to people that you didn't mean what you said or that you did. And you know, hey, that's the story, and go with it. And that's what they needed. But it's somebody who can execute, who can build teams and execute. You know, the one thing I wanted to mention about news was, so NASA put out this request for proposals for the, it's the USDV, the United States Deorbit Vehicle, the vehicle that is going to be used to deorbit the space station when it's time for it to go bye-bye. And the debate that's going on about what's the best way to eliminate the space station, you know, sell it for parts and let it hang around up there and people can go pick it apart, sell it to somebody to convert, or take it and attach a spacecraft to it, which is this deorbit vehicle that will slowly bring it into the Earth's atmosphere and burn it up over the Pacific Ocean. It seems like a waste of a lot of stuff to some people, although most of the technology on it's pretty dated, but they are, you know, habitable modules. We and a handful of other countries spent a lot of money building parts, but it's going to be fascinating to watch this. There's about 160 million in the 2024 NASA budget for the development of this thing.
Wow.
And it's going to take years to test this and figure out what's the right one. And we're going to have all these people fighting over, I've got a better idea. But I'm still thinking that somebody might show up and say, we'll buy it. And you know, Axiom, of course, is attaching a space station to it. And then the whole idea was that they will detach and go free fly on their own when it's time for the station to go. I don't know. It's going to be fun to watch this, but if you ever thought that the naysayers, the anti-NASA spending crowd, look what we could do with all that money. If you want to give them some fuel, burn up that space station and throw it away. Watch what happens. the people who hated the station are suddenly going to be crying waste. So, at its demise. So, I just think it's fascinating. It's going to get a lot more press as we go forward. Because
when is it supposed to be decommissioned? If it's decommissioned,
28, 30, 31, somewhere around there. The new stations being built right now are all supposed to ideally be flying by the time it goes. So, Orbital Reef, Blue Origin's beautiful project. It really is. Voyager, Starlab, Axiom Station, of course. Everybody started out saying, "Oh, we're going to fly them in 26." That was when when the money got awarded a couple of years ago. Now it's hopefully by 28, and then someone said, "Well, maybe by the end of the decade." Again, you're not building a rocket. You're building something that's going to ideally has to have the same amount of internal volume space for people to live and work and do research as this station. And by the way, you're building it in a circular, cylindrical type of a format so that it will fit inside of a starship. And so that's how they're being built, 30 feet or so in diameter. And, hard shell, just deploy it pre-built, or an inflatable module that's deployed pre-built. So you have to do no manufacturing after launch.
Could SpaceX's Starship could you just leave it up there and have that be a station that you live and work out of? Like, has anybody talked about that? Because it's pretty big.
No, what you're talking about is really actually, Bryce, the notion of using spent rockets, these big, hollow, giant cylinders of a rocket, because all Starship is a capsule on top, and then a whole bunch of empty storage volume that's not really pressurized or anything like that. So it's, and there's a lot of spent upper stages of rockets floating around in the debris field up there. And a lot of people said, gee, grab those and trick them out internally and, put in a whole new interior and pressurize them, and they could be, habitats. It's probably easier today to just build stuff and send it up. When manufacturing is going really well in orbit in another 10 years, then it makes sense. For now, they're better off used to store space debris. In a neat, easy place to be used for recycling and other purposes.
I'm picturing, instead of like the Home and Garden Network showing like fixer upper houses, it'll be like fixer upper used rockets.
SGTV, Space Garden and Garden Television. Yes, don't laugh. You're gonna, there will be HGTV shows for your garden on the moon at some point. I won't see it, but somebody will. Anyway, I know we're right at the bottom of the hour here.
Well, it's good stuff as always. So, always a different topic or two every week, and always
space is big.
Space is big.
Any crypto news, Mr. Crypto?
Nothing that I've seen really. Mr. Gensler was again speaking today, and have his critics and supporters largely depending upon what side of the aisle they're on. So it's just the same old circus whenever he talks. So you have Emmer the Bulldog, like always, sniping him. So
well,
Bitcoin tried to make a move this morning, and then as fast as it went up, it came right back down to exactly where it was. It was interesting.
Yeah, it's at 25 to 28 range. So whenever 25's been tested, actually both have. So whenever it moves out of that range, fully, I think we could see an easy, maybe 5K, 3K move after that. 10%. Up or down.
Well, if we're going to use crypto as a currency off planet, as Cody always likes to talk about, we better get it figured out down here first. So, hey, by the way, we've got our one last thought. We got our OSIRIS-REx samples back. So I think that happened since last week. I believe the asteroid sample return mission.
Oh yeah.
From Bennu. If anybody watched, the landing was Sunday morning. Pretty
straight gold.
We're going to find out what was there, and we know that the asteroids are loaded with precious metals. So we're looking more for, because this is a really old asteroid, so this should predate, could predate Earth. It could go back to the earliest days of the solar system, all the planets were forming. So, and seeing the composition and everything else that it can tell us, so it'll be pretty cool. We think it's mostly metal. So, and then the spacecraft itself is flying on. It dropped the sample off, and it came to the surface, and then it's flying on to rendezvous with Apophis, which is due to fly by on Friday the 13th of April in 2029. Its orbit may or may not intersect with that of the Earth. It was something we identified a few years ago, and it was predicted that it would likely hit the Earth. It was going to come within 10,000 miles. Okay, which is pretty damn close when you think that the moon is 250,000 miles away. And now NASA says, no, there's no risk. But this one's going to be a close one. So it's going to go rendezvous with Apophis. And Apophis, of course, named after an Egyptian god of destruction. How appropriate.
Lovely.
Yes.
That's funny.
Anyway, asteroid news. Sorry.
Cool.
No, that was cool stuff. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess since it's the bottom of the hour, go ahead, Bryce.
No,
go ahead, Bryce.
Sorry, Joe. Sorry.
Yeah, go, Joe.
I heard a voice.
I was just going to say, when Snotty gets back, we'll figure out for everybody, if everybody's watching, about rewards for the month. Not sure what's going on with that for Scattle's rewards. And we'll get that news out there on Telegram.
Awesome.
There you have it. Any last comments before we leave for the week?
Live long and prosper.
There you go. And
all right,
don't cross Apophis. So
no.
All right, we'll see everybody next week.
All right. You got it. Take care, everybody. Be safe.
See you.